When winter rolled across the battlefields of World War I, it wasn't the bullets or the bombs that claimed the most lives, it was the cold. In the flooded trenches of France and Belgium, men slept ankle-deep in ice water. Their boots froze solid. Their breath turned to frost before it left their lips. Fuel was scarce, fires were forbidden, and the wind howled through the dugouts like a living thing. Hypothermia, frostbite, trench foot. The cold didn't attack. It waited. And every night, soldiers knew that the smallest mistake, a wet sock, a dying fire, a missed sunrise, could mean death. Yet in this frozen wasteland, surrounded by mud, fear, and gunfire, something remarkable happened. A spark of ingenuity. A creation that required no factory, no power, and almost no resources, but kept thousands alive. It was called the trench stove, and it became one of the greatest survival inventions of the Great War. Open flames were dangerous. A wisp of smoke could draw sniper fire. A flicker of light could expose an entire trench. And even if they managed to build a fire, it burned too hot, too fast, consuming what little wood they had left. The trenches weren't just cold, they were suffocating. With barely any airflow underground, a single fire could drain oxygen in minutes. Men would wake up dizzy, choking, eyes burning with smoke. They needed a way to stay warm without light, without smoke, and without wasting fuel. Something small, something portable, something that could hide its own flame. Necessity, as always, became the mother of invention. By late 1915, soldiers began building their own solutions from scrap. Empty ammunition tins, biscuit boxes, fuel cans. Anything made of metal could become a heater. They filled them with what they could find: charcoal, wood chips, bits of coal dust, even dried mud soaked in oil or bacon grease. They punched a few holes near the bottom for air to enter, and one or two near the top for heat to escape. And just like that, they had a working stove. It was quiet, it was efficient, and it could burn for hours without smoke. A British variant soon became famous: the Tommy cooker, a small tin filled with a hardened alcohol gel. It wasn't powerful, but it could boil a mess tin of water or heat a cup of tea, even in the mud. To the men in the trenches, that faint blue flame meant survival. A small miracle of warmth in a world of cold iron and rain. But official supplies never lasted long. So, soldiers began crafting improvised versions, known as Primus or Tommy cookers, from whatever scraps they had. An old fuel can would become the body. A spent rifle casing could serve as a chimney. Some used bent wire or tin handles to carry them from post to post. Fuel came from anywhere: kerosene, paraffin, lamp oil, even animal fat mixed with sawdust. As long as it burned, it worked. And when night fell and the temperature dropped below freezing, men would gather around these small flickers of heat, cooking, drying socks, thawing fingers stiff from frost. The trench stove became more than a tool. It became a symbol of endurance, a reminder that no matter how harsh the war became, the human will to survive burned hotter still. What made these stoves so effective wasn't luck, it was physics. The trench stove operated on the same principles that modern rocket stoves and bushcraft heaters use today: controlled combustion. By limiting oxygen at the base and forcing hot air through a narrow chamber, soldiers achieved a steady, concentrated burn. It wasn't about making a big fire, it was about making a smart one. Less air meant slower fuel consumption. A smaller chamber meant more heat retention. And that balance produced clean, smokeless warmth. Many soldiers even discovered a double can method. They placed a smaller tin inside a larger one, with air channels between them. The inner tin held the fuel, while the outer one directed airflow and trapped heat. The result? A portable heater that could run for hours on scraps of fuel. They didn't know it then, but they had built the ancestor of modern off-grid heating systems. As the war dragged into its second winter, the trench stove evolved again. Field engineers began installing semi-permanent versions in deeper shelters. Metal drums became furnaces. Clay and brick lined the walls to store heat. Tin pipes ran underground like veins, carrying warmth from one room to another. In some French and German positions, they built double-chamber systems that recycled the same air twice, increasing fuel efficiency by nearly 50%. These primitive heaters could turn freezing dugouts into livable quarters. They burned anything that could ignite: coal dust, peat, paper logs, even the wooden handles from broken tools. Every scrap became energy. Every ember meant life. And somewhere between the mud and misery, soldiers had built the first true trench heating systems in human history. To us, a small flame might seem trivial, but to the men living in the cold mud of the Somme or Verdun, it was salvation. A warm cup of tea, a pair of socks drying over a tin flame, steam rising softly in the dark, the only sign that someone was still alive. That heat became a kind of therapy. It lifted morale. It gave soldiers a reason to keep going. In a world where steel and death ruled every horizon, the trench stove was a flicker of home, a memory of kitchens, firesides, and family warmth far away. Today, survivalists and off-grid builders still use the same principles. The tin can stove, the rocket heater, the barrel furnace with underground exhaust. All of them trace back to those improvised devices built under fire over a century ago. With just a few holes, a bit of airflow control, and the right fuel, you can recreate the same system, one that can heat a shelter, boil water, and cook food without electricity or heavy fuel. It's a design so simple, it survived the trenches, 2 world wars, and an entire century of technological change. The trench stove wasn't just a wartime invention. It was the blueprint for modern sustainable heat. The trench stove reminds us of something timeless. Survival isn't about gear. It's about understanding. It's about knowing how heat, air, and fuel work together. The soldiers of the Great War had no generators, no propane tanks, no comfort. Just mud, metal, and willpower. Yet they created warmth in a place where hope itself froze. In a world where power grids can fail and supplies can vanish overnight, their invention still whispers the same lesson: that with ingenuity and courage, humanity will always find a way to endure. The trench stove was more than a tool. It was proof that even in humanity's darkest winters, a single spark of innovation can keep the fire alive. If this story of forgotten survival tech inspired you, share it, and subscribe to Forgotten Survival for more lost inventions that kept humanity alive through history's harshest tests.